For those of you who are coming to the channel for the first time, I want to welcome you. I want to put you on notice though that this is not a cooking channel or even a prepping channel. The focus of this channel is to prepare people for when things go bad. It could be an invasion of the United States. It could be total economic collapse. Some type of situation where you would have to defend yourself and your loved ones and potentially fight back. Now, what I have for you on this very first video of what will potentially be a new series I will include in my stuff, we are thinking about calling it guerrilla cooking or cooking from the trenches. Either are appropriate. And in this video, I'm going to give you a recipe for baked beans using only what you would have in a cache in the field or in your deep larder if you are a prepper or a survivalist. So all of these items are long-term storage items. These are not fresh items like you're going to see in pretty much every other baked bean recipe out there. This recipe is just 9 ingredients. I know you see that there's 8 there, but the 9th ingredient is water. Let's be serious. You're cooking beans, you're going to need to add a little bit of water, so that's kind of a given. Now, the first step for making these beans is obviously soaking your beans. Now, this recipe is made off of 1 pound batches of dried beans. Start soaking your beans the day before. Let them soak overnight. How long? 10 to 12 hours. Be advised that your beans will double, or as in the case of this batch, triple in size when they soak in water. Be aware of that. There is going to be a huge volume change. So you soak them overnight. You then drain off the water. Some people say save some of the water for flavor. I personally just drain it off. Now remember, before you add the water for soaking the beans, start pouring them out a little bit at a time onto a pan, on a plate, into a bowl, something, and pick out any rocks or debris that for some reason could have ended up in that package of beans when they were getting packaged after drying. It does happen occasionally. So just be forewarned. You don't want someone coming up to you after they get their food and show you a little rock or a piece of twig that you missed. So we soaked our beans and we're going to get ready to cook them for the next day. Now you can do these in a crock pot, or you can do them in a Dutch oven. You can do them in a pot in the field with a campfire. I will put a link in the description and also as a pinned comment to a video by a channel called Townsend's, where Jason Townsend went through and he showed 2 different methods for cooking baked beans back during the Revolutionary War time period. So 18th century cooking. But for this one, I'm going to show you mixing it all in the crock pot. So first off, we're going to pour in our soaked beans. And this batch really kind of sealed themselves in. Just like I said, these tripled in size. Normally they double in size, but it happens. Where your beans are going to vary as they soak. Obviously, beans, it's a 1-for-1, regardless if you're doing it with fresh ingredients or dried. I'm going off of 1 pound batches, easiest to configure for if you're doing a larger group or if you're paring it down. Next, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of ground mustard or mustard powder. Now the conversion on this from dried to wet ingredient is half a teaspoon of dried for every 1 tablespoon of yellow mustard that you get in the store. But you can't exactly store yellow mustard long term. Ground, powdered, you can. So 1 teaspoon of powdered mustard. 1.5 teaspoons of salt if you got issues with you're on a low sodium diet. Obviously cut this down. From my experiments though, 1.5 teaspoons really was the best flavors wise. As you're adding the dry seasoning, just spread it around on the beans just to kind of mix it around in there. Next, black pepper. We're going to add half a teaspoon of black pepper. Next up, this one is going to be a variation, and the reason you vary this next ingredient is your personal preference. Brown sugar. I recommend between 2/3 to 1 cup of brown sugar. If you prefer more of the molasses flavor, go with the dark brown. This is light brown. Now, conversion on this to molasses is a 1-for-1. So we got here 1 cup that are pre-measured. Now we are going to add 1 tablespoon of minced onion. Now the conversion on this for fresh onion is 1 tablespoon for every small onion. And that onion you will cut up and dice to the size pieces that you want. Personally, I wish that the pieces inside the minced onion were a little bit larger than what they are, but this does work. You will have a few pieces, the larger pieces, left after cooking. Next, 4 to 6 tablespoons of bacon bits. And you want the TVP type, the textured vegetable protein, the type that is meant for on salads. This is an item that can be long-term stored. You cannot long-term store regular bacon because of the fat content. It will go rancid. So bacon bits or bacon bits, and the conversion on this is 2 to 3 teaspoons, or roughly 1 tablespoon of bacon bits for every 1 slice of bacon. If you want to extend out your bacon bits, obviously use less. I think this turns out a lot better with going with the 6 tablespoons per pound, but that's just me. Adjust it according to your taste. Now this next item is going to be a variation up to your tastes. Some type of dry barbecue seasoning. What type you use is up to you. If you have a sweeter type of barbecue seasoning, I would say probably go to the 2/3 of a cup of brown sugar so that you don't make your beans too sweet. If you go to a more spicier type barbecue seasoning, a hot and spicy type, maybe go towards that 1 cup of brown sugar. As I said, this is a personal taste thing. It's all up to you. And this particular barbecue seasoning I was able to get at Walmart in their barbecuing section. So I have down 1 tablespoon of barbecue seasoning, and that is for every pound of beans. Now at this point, if you want to do a variation, some things that I could see is if you want to spice it up a little, add some crushed red pepper or some powdered cayenne pepper, red pepper. Another thing could be, if you want to for taste, you could add a little bit of garlic powder. That's your personal preference. Give this a try. See if you want to add a little bit to it. You know, adjust it as you see fit. Now, we have one ingredient left. Water. From my personal experience with preparing this in a crock pot, I find that 4 cups of water is sufficient. If you're going to do this in a Dutch oven or some other pot over a campfire, you might want to bump the water up to maybe 5 or 6 cups of water per pound, because you might have a bit more moisture that's going to escape your pot in that setting. I talked to a YouTuber by the name of Milkmaid, and she said how she prepares her beans. She doesn't usually measure out the water. She just goes off a rule of thumb of getting roughly about 1 inch of water over the top of your ingredients in the pot. So that's something to consider. Now, how many servings will this make? Figure you're going to want between, when you're considering it as the dry beans, figure you're going to want to be giving out about 4 to 8 ounces of beans to a person. You know, it's not going to be exact. You're going to go by how much you scoop out of the container. If these didn't triple in size, when I've done beans that doubled in size, we got roughly 5 to 6 servings of baked beans out of this recipe. With the beans being tripled in size this time, you could potentially see it bumped up to as much as 9 servings. How much is a serving? That's going to be up to you. Figure 1 ladleful. So you're probably saying, well, what is this going to look like when it's done? Because all you're seeing is a giant crock of bean soup here. I'll get to that. Now, cook time on this, actually when heat's applied, figure 8 to 10 hours. In a crock pot, usually 8 is really good. Depending on doing it over a campfire, maybe you have to go a little bit longer because it may not be as hot as what you want, the coals. The coals that you put over your container, over your pot, depending on your method, will cool down, so then maybe it'll kick it up to 10 hours. Just experiment and see what works best for you. But like I said, with a crock pot, you're looking at about 8 hours. And when it's done, it'll look like this. I didn't add any garnish to it. This is the way your beans will look. You serve them on the campsite or in your base camp if you're in a resistance cell, or you're pulling that pot off of that wood stove in your retreat cabin in the middle of the woods. I will put a list of the ingredients and a quick dirty recipe in the description. I will also add that to the pinned comment below. Now, for everyone in the patriot, militia, prepper, survivalist movements, always remember, essayons, let us try.